Welcome to Music and Medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Moshe Lewis. Really excited today to be in the home of Dr. Angie McCartney and her lovely daughter, Ruth McCartney. This is a sheer delight. We've been having tea, and so you all are somewhat interrupting us, but getting to peek in on a private conversation with these two ladies that really do everything wine, tea, and CBD. And if that's not enough, they are the owner and founder of McCartney Multimedia. What a mouthful. A delight to be able to meet you and
Thank you.
home and to have some tea.
Thank you. Yes, sure.
Bottoms
There's
up,
one saying
pinkies
cheers
down.
with tea. I think so.
Exactly. It's a delight.
Cheers.
But bottoms up, but pinkies down.
Oh, okay.
One doesn't, many people in America think you have to do this.
Sure,
No.
yeah,
No, that's a
That's
no-no.
considered
No, you read that in my history of tea.
I love
The
it.
do's and don'ts. Yes, no pinkies up.
I love it. We're going to roll back the clock in time because it is hard to imagine that you're getting ready to celebrate your 95th birthday.
God willing.
Absolutely.
And the creek don't rise?
Yes.
So 1929. I just want for the viewers to talk about that time and what it was like growing up. I know technically you were born just outside of Liverpool, if I'm not mistaken.
I was born over
Riverside.
the other side of the river in Hoylake,
Mhm.
over the Mersey. And then when I was, I think about 3 years old, I was suffering from asthma and all sorts of lung things every year. And my father was working for a doctor who said, it's too moist and low-lying here. You should get over the other side. So he helped the family get a corporation house in a district called Norris Green, which is about 12 miles outside the city. And that's where we lived until I was, what was I? 20-something, the first time I got married.
26.
Yeah,
Wow.
26, yeah.
Yeah. And then what I also wanted to tease out about that story was that also limited you being able to go to school for quite some time until you were about
Well,
6.
yes, the war started in September 1939, and by about 1941 or 2, the bombing of Liverpool every night was just, decimating the city. And our school was one that wasn't hit. That was St. Teresa's School. And so all the people whose homes had been bombed went to live in the school, and we were all just farmed out. And we used to go to school a half a day a week in somebody's corporation house nearby. And we used to have to take a halfpenny, not a penny,
Right.
but a halfpenny. It was called a halfpenny
Right.
to put in her gas meter.
Oh.
So she could light the little fire in the room where we all met with our teacher, and we'd say a prayer that we were still here. And then we'd do roll call and just generally chit-chat about what was happening with our fathers and brothers in the army, and say another little prayer and see you next week, and off we'd go.
Hopefully.
And
Yeah.
yeah, hopefully.
Right. And what was your sense? Because I think that's so hard for so many people here to relate to today about what you were thinking and going through your mind. And it seems so frightening.
I wasn't afraid. I didn't think we were having a hard time. In fact, I loved not having to go to school. I thought that was great. But every day about 4:30 or 5, the sirens would go and we'd get in the air raid shelter and be there till next morning. And my first thing every night was, what have we got to eat? And my older sister May would have filled up a big tin of whatever she could muster, sandwiches or make sausage rolls if she'd been fortunate to get any sausages. And we used to do multiplication tables, jigsaw puzzles, crossword puzzles, and we only had candles, raw candles and saucers.
And a mud floor.
And a mud floor, yeah.
And freezing cold.
Yeah.
And hours.
Hours, yeah. But we were fine. My sister, who was 5-6 years older than me, Joan, she and I used to giggle and laugh all night, and my mother would go, shh, shh, that's enough. Let me listen. And I didn't want to listen to the planes. We just wanted to talk and sing. And I think that was the stage in my life where probably deep down I wanted to become a writer.
Yeah. Do you sense that children always are so capable of?
Oh,
or
yeah,
have
I
to be
think so.
carefree?
Yes, I think children are very resilient, and I firmly believe that they really respond to their upbringing at that stage.
Sure.
My mother was very strict, and I was very strict with Ruth. Wasn't I, darling?
Yes. It just led to all this. It just led to all this elder abuse.
So talking about being resilient, if I'm not mistaken, you got your teaching certificate before you were even 13.
Oh, my music teaching, piano teaching, yeah, I was 13, just before my 13th birthday, I think it was. And I used to deliver newspapers in Liverpool, the Liverpool Echo, and I think I earned 3 shillings a week, which was a big deal in those days. And that paid for my piano lessons with Mrs. Foley across the road.
Because every other house had a piano. And
Yeah,
in the air raid
definitely.
shelters, too, a lot of people were evacuated from London. So they would get, quote unquote, roommates for a month here and there.
Yeah.
And they would bring, a harmonica, a squeeze box. One guy living down the block from Angie had a saxophone, and they used to be yelling, "Shut up!" He'd play the saxophone in the air raid shelter at night.
Yeah, and the
So
spoons. People used to, are you familiar with spoon playing?
It's
Oh, yeah.
about
A couple of
elbow.
spoons on the elbows and the knees. And yeah.
So there was music everywhere.
Mm.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
Liverpool being a seafaring town, a port for years and years, its birthplaces or birth date is in the 1300s.
Mhm.
And so all kinds of musical influences had come in through the years through the port. And there'd be a djembe in one hut and a saxophone in another. And it was just crazy.
Talk to us about sort of your teen years, and then as time went by, just sort of transitioning out of that, because it still seems quite.
Yeah, well, I got my first job when I was 14, and I'd had very little education, of course. Very little education until I came to America, actually. And God bless Google. On Facebook, when you sign up and they say education, and I wrote University of Google. Because I'm still learning. I watch a lot of documentaries, and it's amazing how much information I learn.
Sure.
But, yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, unfortunately, your first husband was killed.
Yes, he was killed in a car crash, yeah.
And then that's Ruth's dad.
That's right, yes,
Sure.
yeah.
So how did you respond to sort of, with the second marriage, sort of having a sibling, so to speak?
Yeah, well, I was 4 years old in November 1964 when Angie met. She had met my dad, Jim McCartney, in the August of that year. And the previous May, I'd had my kidney removed and nearly died. I was 7 weeks in Alder Hey Hospital. And so we were both going through a bit of a... and of course, the Beatles did Ed Sullivan on February of the 9th of that same year and came home to a hero's welcome on the balcony of the Liverpool town hall with the mayor and all of the dignitaries and everybody. And Ange, who had not met my dad yet, was one of the fans in the crowd.
In the crowd on Castle Street, looking up at them on the balcony, never knowing I was going to be part of that family in a few months.
Wow.
And then a mutual friend got in touch with Angie through a happenstance where he was on the way. Mike Robbins was his name. He became our cousin by marriage. And he was on the way to a funeral in Liverpool, and he got lost and stopped into a grocer's shop, like a regular store. And Angie's sister, my Auntie Joan, and they had the identical voice pattern. It's like John and Julian Lennon. They sound the same, And he walked in and said, "I need directions to Broad Green Cemetery." And my aunt answered him. He said, "You're not Angela, but I have an old friend I haven't seen for years. She's got a little baby girl."
She said, "Yeah, that's my sister."
That's my sister. "Oh, give her my number. We'll stay in touch." Well, we didn't have a phone in the house. You had to go to the phone box and put pennies in. And so Ange got in touch with Mike and his wife, Bet Robbins. And Bet was the matchmaker. She knew Jim McCartney had been widowed 4 years earlier in 1956, put them together, and they had 3 meetings, and
that was it. Meeting.
The fourth
meeting.
The fourth meeting was the wedding, and boom, there you are.
Yeah.
And before we race along that, if I understand, the proposal is a little bit different.
Yes, it was, because I had an idea of what this was leading up to. Jim had said, "Come on over one night next week and bring the little baby. She's a bit bigger now." And he sent a car to my office where I worked on the Kirby Trading Estate, Pure Chemicals. Sent a car for me, and then we went to the nursery and picked up Ruth, drove through the Mersey Tunnel to Jim's house, and we had a little time together, and then I put Ruth to bed. Came downstairs, and Jim came in with a silver tray with champagne and 2 glasses. I thought, oh, here it goes.
Here it comes.
Here we go. And I was playing the piano. He had an upright piano in the lounge at that stage against the wall. And I'm playing the piano, and Jim comes in and said, "I want to ask you something." And I said, "The answer's yes." He said, "I haven't asked you the ruddy question yet." And that was it. So, we went back and sat on the couch and talked about things. And he said, what would you like to do? I mean, you can see I'm very lonely here, and my arthritis has just begun, and, I can't drive. And would you like to either move in or be my housekeeper or live with me or get married? I said, 3.
Sure.
Behind door number 3.
Yeah, I was a bit old-fashioned in those days. I probably would have said 1 or 2.
Right.
But shortly after, the phone rang, and the phone was in the hall.
Right.
Jim walked out there and said, "Hello, son." I thought, oh, that's him.
Wow.
That's him, the Beatle.
Sure.
And he said, "Yes, she is. Yes, I have. Yes, we are. Hold on, I'll put her on the phone." Oh. And I walked across the hall with my knees knocking and said, "Hello." And Paul said, "Hello, you sound nice." I mean, what a stupid thing to say. I sound nice. I only said hello. But he said, "Are you staying the night?" I said, "Oh, yes, the baby's asleep upstairs." He said, "Oh, I'll jump in the car, but I'm in London, so it'll take about 3 hours." So Jim and I went and quaffed some more champagne and some tea. And then we heard the car coming down the road. And Jim went out into the garage and opened the doors. We didn't have garage clickers in those days.
No, we were missing those.
None of those
No
newfangled
ring.
things, no. Well, he came in, and I was in the kitchen washing up cups and saucers.
Sure.
And Paul came in, very formally dressed in a beige suit and a brown and cream tie and brown lace-up shoes. I can see them to this day. And he came in and he said, "Hello, I'm Paul," and extended his hand. I said, "Yeah, I think I know that." So we went into the lounge and sat down again. He said, "Where's the baby? Go and get the baby." So I went upstairs with this little toddler, but I wouldn't try to lift her now, of course.
And you were at the time 4?
Yes,
4, yeah.
4. And I came down, of course, with all the bright lights. You know, when you wake up from a dead sleep and there's a light in your eyes, you're immediately cranky, aren't you?
Sure.
And so I come down and I'm thinking to my 4-year-old self, this better be good. And it was pretty good, yeah. So Ange put me on his lap and I sort of rubbed my eyes and opened my eyes and I recognized him. And much to everyone's embarrassment, I'm like, "Wait a minute, I know who you are. You're on my cousin's wallpaper." My cousin Geraldine had Beatle wallpaper in her playhouse. And she was just mortified. She's like, "Oh, good grief."
But it broke the ice, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah, no, he laughed. And then I said, "Oh, do you want to see my scar?" And I stopped pulling my pajamas up. And so I've got 210 stitches. Do you want to see them, you know? And he said, "Oh, Ringo's got scars like that on his tummy. He's had his appendix out." So the first conversation I ever had with my to-be stepbrother, the Beatle, was about stitches and surgery.
I love it.
Kind of fun.
What was your sense about music and their music even before that type of meeting? Because
music was always a part of my life. My father was a pianist in the army in World War I. He was a pianist in the military and used to play the piano at all the concerts and, you know, for the troops and things. My mother was an opera singer. And so they both had, you know, great musical backgrounds, family-wise. And when I was a little kid, my father died when I was 7, but when I was younger than that, Mum and Dad used to go to the Shakespeare Theatre in Liverpool and see all kinds of variety performers. And he'd come home and he'd go upstairs and get me, put me on a pillow on his lap and play the piano. He'd say, "This one's not going to be pretty. Thanks, Dad. But by God, she's going to love music." And he'd play all the tunes they'd heard that night.
By ear.
Yeah, by ear. Yeah. Yeah. So music was always a part of it.
Sure.
You know.
Do you all sense that it changed a bit coming into the family, that now you were playing a lot more music in the house, or how did it continue to evolve?
Not especially. I sent her for piano lessons, which she hated with passion.
I didn't hate the lessons. The teacher just smelled weird. She just smelled like, you know, when sour cream's turning pink and it's got that.
And did you come up with a nickname for her?
Mrs. Stinky, yeah. But I didn't hate the piano. I just hated the teacher. So I was more interested in dance. My Aunt May, her oldest sister, was a ballerina. And so I went to the Northwest Stage School and I studied guitar and piano and songwriting and so on and so forth, and did subsequently, which we'll talk about, have a musical career. But I was more about the interpretive dance, you know, all of that hippie stuff. But yeah, no, there was a lot of music in the house. And let's not forget Jim McCartney, my stepdad. He had Jim Mac's band in 1920. And, you know, he had how many pieces was it? It was huge, wasn't it? Like 18,
about 8,
20-piece band?
Yeah, 2 of his brothers were in it, yeah. And they called themselves the Masked Marauders, I think. And they had black paper masks, you know.
Like Venice.
Yeah.
Like
and
Venice
on one very hot night, and they were all sweating all the black paint was running down their faces. So they scrapped the masks,
And
cleaned up, and it was just known as Jim Mack's band after that.
Yeah, absolutely. And to what extent, just as sort of you're getting into your teen years and things like that, did you sense, oh gosh, some of the music and some of the things and some of the performances that we're going to are not something that maybe every teenager can get to go to?
Yeah, I was even younger than that. Because by the time I was 9, the Beatles had broken up. So teenage stuff was Wings, and they were doing all kinds of crazy things like touring around in a double-decker bus and just showing up at school gymnasiums and going, hey, my name's Paul McCartney. Can we play tonight?
Can we play tonight? Yeah.
Yeah. So most of my early concert experiences would be Beatle stuff. And honestly, you couldn't really hear the music for the screaming.
No.
So sometimes we'd be in the front row, sometimes we'd be in the family box, sometimes we'd be on the side of the stage, and you could hear the wedge monitors a little bit better. But I mean, to have been there is quite incredible. But you couldn't, how they could hear each other, I have no idea. Ringo once said something, and I'm paraphrasing, like if George wasn't doing that silly thing with his legs, he didn't know where the beat was because he couldn't hear them and they couldn't hear themselves.
Sure.
You know.
The music is effervescent and timeless. What elements do you think really sort of help contribute to that? All of the local references?
Their sense of humor initially, I would say, wouldn't you?
Well, within the music, I think the very first things were very simple, 4 on the floor, every man, relatable lyrics. I want to hold your hand.
She loves you.
She loves you. Yeah. They were young, teenage and early 20s guys singing about how to meet their dream girl. And I think everyone who listened to that on the radio, whether it be Dream Girl or secretly in those days Dream Boy, was like, oh yeah, I identify with that. It's the same reason that, you know, country music and especially Garth Brooks' writing team had such an impact on music, is because people can see themselves in it. That's why Taylor Swift is such a genius, because she thinks she sings about things that are relevant to her audience. You know, in marketing, we always, first meeting with a client, we say, who is your audience? Thus, what is your message, right? So I think that's where they started. And then they got obviously more sophisticated, and some idiot introduced them to drugs, which is a whole nother conversation. But I think that was it. It was that they were just identifiable with their fans.
But I think one of their great appeals was how they handled the press. They were just themselves. You know, a guy evidently said to George one time, what do you call this? He said, George's hair.
Yeah. Another one was, oh gosh, you know, they've been on television one day, and then they landed. I did a Pan Am press conference at JFK, and one of the smart Alec reporters said, oh, you got a haircut, I see. And George said, no, I got them all cut. You know, they would just give it back. But that's just, if you've never been to Liverpool, you don't understand. Everybody's a comedian.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it was bombed flat by Z Germans, as we like to call them when I refer to my very talented husband.
Here.
Yeah. And so when you think...
Don't mention the war.
The Beatles grew up in black and white and ended their career. They took their fans from black and white to psychedelia and ended their career in color. It was bound to change their music. All of the travel to India with the Maharishi and, you know, all of the people that they met and the cultures and the wives and girlfriends that brought their whole, you know, persona to play with the whole thing. So...
What are some of the travels or things that you all have experienced together that just were almost out of this world?
Well, we had our honeymoon in the Bahamas where they were filming Help.
Right.
So that was, you know, follow that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First time I was ever on a plane was to the film set of Help in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
Okay. We stopped over in Bermuda, and all I remember is it smelled like fish and chips.
Yes.
Between my music teacher and the Bermuda airport.
Smells.
I should write an olfactory compendium.
You should. Yes.
Exactly.
Smells by Ruth McCartney.
I'll call it olfactory compendium.
Yeah, okay, fine.
Who are some of the people that came by from time to time, if not on the regular, that just simply now, as you look back, you're like, wow, they were just sitting with us and we were talking and joking?
Well, Paul used to bring John Lennon home, didn't he, for weekends after they had moved, he and Cynthia and Julian had moved down south. And he didn't have a home in Liverpool anymore. He'd bought his Aunt Mimi a house in Poole in Dorset. So Paul would bring him up to our house, and the two of them would get up to some capers. One weekend, Paul said, we want to go out on the bus. Jim said, you'll get mobbed, you'll get your hair cut, don't be ridiculous. He said, no, give us some of your old raincoats and some of your old hats. And Jim had hats in the greenhouse that the
Gardening.
gardeners would wear when it
floppy
was
hat.
showery and they were doing the grass. So they put these things on, and Jim found two spectacle frames, punched the lenses out of them, and they went out in those. And I was allowed to run them in the car up to the bus station on the top road at Crosville bus station. And off they went to Chester. And they evidently went to a couple of pubs first, had one or two beers, and they went off on a spending spree. And when they came home...
Well, they went to an auction house.
Oh, that's right. They went
They found an estate sale.
That's right.
And they went in, and John said, "You go in first," because John always used to make, Paul always used to make the bullets and have John fire them. Mm-hmm. And John's like, "You go in first." And Paul's like, "No, I'm sick of, no, sod off, you go in first." So John went in first, and he got one of the little programs and all the lot numbers and this, that, and the other. And Paul was outside smoking a ciggy, and a whole ton of people came in. And so Paul came in at the end, and so they were separated from each other's visual view.
Right, yeah.
Only come to find out they were bidding against each other for a half an hour, and they didn't know what they were bidding on because they'd been to the pub.
Right.
And they were bidding on the linoleum they were standing on.
It was all cracked and grimy, you know. Yeah.
Oh my
But
God.
they did go to a couple of antique shops.
Oh,
and
they
buy some
did.
stuff.
When they came home late afternoon, a little bit the worse for wear. And
on the
also,
bus, mind you, they weren't driving.
after the weekend, Ange, there'll be a van. We bought a few things and there'll be a van coming. So just get the driver to stick them all in the garage and we'll arrange something. Well, Monday came around and this enormous van turned up. And there was a crucifix as high as this ceiling.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, riddled with woodworm.
What did you say about
And
45
a
feet?
bed.
40 feet.
Yeah, oh, I know. A pine bed, again, woodworm.
The crucifix wouldn't even fit in the length of
No.
the garage.
Yeah.
And this is what they
John had
brought
bought
during the
John
estate
had bought
sale.
a crucifix. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And various other things, statuettes and goblets and all sorts of stuff. And when it came, I said, "That's not coming in my house. It'll riddle the house with woodworm." So Jim got somebody from one of the local,
Movers.
hardware shops to come and treat it with woodworm killer or whatever, And they eventually got Alistair Taylor, who was the main assistant to Brian Epstein at the time. Mr. Fix-It, he was called. Alistair Taylor arranged for somebody to come and transport it all to London.
Right.
Years later, Ruth and I, you tell him about that.
So in 2015, which was the 50th anniversary of various Beatle things from 65, we have a partner of McCartney GmbH in Vienna, Ryman Karl. So we have an office in Vienna, Austria. And they arranged this mini tour with Ange and I and Frida Kelly, the Beatles fan club secretary, and Brian Epstein's secretary, and Klaus Vormann, who drew the Revolver cover. And we had some screenings. So we did various gigs across Austria, starting in Vienna. And the last one was in Obertauern, this beautiful little city where the Beatles filmed the Help scene. Side story, unbeknownst to me, until then, apparently Obertauern, the week before, when we were all still in the Bahamas, had a terrible avalanche and people were killed. Wow. And so the Beatles had no idea when they landed in Salzburg and they drove to Obertauern. The whole townspeople were lining the street, and the Beatles are like, "Oh, that's great. They've come to wave to us." But they were facing the other way, watching the mountain in case there was going to be another avalanche that killed the Beatles. I mean, I don't know what one guy with a shovel would have done.
No, not a lot.
But anyway, so fast forward to 2015, we're in Obertauern, and somebody said, can we make this interview focus, because it was all in German, and I had to translate to Ange and then translate her answer into English and so on. The last few shows you've done have been mainly about Paul and George and Ringo. Let's focus this one on John and some of his anecdotes and silly things, and how he taught me how to ride a bicycle and so on and so forth. So we arrive at the theatre for the sound check, and backstage against the wall is a huge 40-foot crucifix.
The crucifix. I'm sure it was the same one. He said, "He's here."
I'm like, oh, he got the message.
He's come to haunt us, yeah.
Oh, so delightful. Since you mentioned music and some early clients that you were working with, talk to us about David Cassidy and your memories of him.
Oh, he was lovely.
My
lovely
boo.
guy, very talented.
Very sweet. Well, I first was aware of him 1972. The Partridge Family aired for the first time in England, and I was sort of, I was 12, so I was like the kid in front of Ed Sullivan.
Sure.
I was that same kid in front of the Partridge Family.
Yeah.
And he announced that he was doing his first solo record and coming to England. And so I'm like, Paul, get me his autograph, get me tickets. I want to meet him. So I would be 12 and Cassidy was 10 years older than me, be 22. And so Paul's like, well, I'll have the office reach out and see what I can do, you know. So one day, this huge package arrives, and I still have them in the other room, all the vinyl records, all signed, and he's hanging on the wall over there. To Ruth, be happy and stay free.
Yeah.
This huge package arrived, and I said to Paul, you know, how'd you pull that off? He said, I know people who know people, you know, we've got this. I'm like, well, I want to ring and thank him. You know, I'm getting all cocky now. And he's like, well, I think he's staying at the Dorchester. I'll give it a go.
Sure.
So we're in the little cubby hole under the stairs, and Paul rings the Dorchester, and he knows that David used to stay under the name of David Jackson because he's Jack Cassidy's son, so he's David Jack's son.
So, right, so.
So he gets through to David Jackson, and Cassidy answers the phone. I'm on the extension, and and he's like, hello? And he said, is this David Bruce Jackson? And he's like, it might be. Who wants to know? And he said, this is Paul McCartney. And Cassidy said, yeah, and I'm the freaking Duke of Edinburgh. And hung up.
Oh, no.
I was like, oh no. So that was my first meeting with him. And then we accidentally bumped into each other 10 years later. I was working on a film crew in Beverly Hills, and he was one of the folks on the shoot. And I went up and introduced myself and said, you know, you'll never remember signing these. He's like, to Paul McCartney's kid stepsister? Are you kidding? Of course I remember getting that request.
Wow.
And so we went off and had a coffee and got to know each other. And then when the web thing rolled around several years later, I rang him and said, you need to be davidcassidy.com. And he's like, what's that? And I'm like, just give me your credit card. It doesn't matter. And so
he was our first client, wasn't he?
He was one of our, Andrew
30
Gold.
years ago.
We had several clients, but David was one of the first in the early 90s for sure. And we were still friends until he unfortunately left us.
Sure. Isn't that amazing to come full circle?
Yes.
Being an adoring fan. And
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, when I saw the call sheet, I was like, oh, wait till I tell him.
What have been some of those like amazing moments you've had now with the business since you've been able to really move forward in multimedia and essentially take some clients, you know, onto the web and even other in their...
Yeah, I mean, the thing where we started, we lost everything in the Northridge earthquake in 94. And we moved to Nashville and met some fantastic people and started our business. One of them was a Australian musician from the Flying Burrito Brothers called Brian Cadd. I went over to his house to write songs, but he was more obsessed that day with his little Mac computer, and he had a 9600 baud modem that plugged in, and it took forever to bring up the screen, you know. And he said to me, he said, oh, wait, you plug this, you unplug the vacuum, you plug this thing in, and then you connect it to the computer, and it sounds like a didgeridoo, ba-doing, and then it's like this thing called a Yahoo, mate. It's amazing. He said, it's like everything underlined in blue links to like another library book. It's my... So I went on the way home from that meeting. I went to the Davidson County Nashville Library. There were only 14 books written on the subject of HTML in the world at the time. I ordered them. They took 4 weeks to come in. I took them home to our apartment in Nashville, and my dear husband Martin and I sat down and learned code and started building websites by literally typing raw HTML code, which I still do things today. People go, this isn't working, or this form's not submitting, whatever. I go, hey, HTML raw headers code. Oh, there's your problem. Your inline is off, you know, or whatever it is. And so that's how we started the business, was back in Nashville. And we moved back here in 97. And through a long and winding, crazy story, I became the owner of a ton of high-profile domain names. Somebody was trying to shake me down for a bunch of them. And so we did the necessary paperwork and the notarization and so on and so forth. And we got McCartney.com, we got Madonna.com, thepope.com, blah, 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 blah. So I just went around Hollywood and gave away these names to people because I'd only paid $50 for them. And so I went to Fleetwood Mac's management and Paula Abdul and Leanne Rimes and all kinds of people. and said, hey, we've got this domain name, happy to give it to you, but I'd really love your business. Can we build your fan club, your database, your website, your merchandise? And that's how we started the business.
Amazing.
So you have to give it away before it
Right,
comes
isn't
back.
it? They always say
Said that, yeah. I'm still giving. Come on
Yeah.
down.
Absolutely. And then I want to talk about the teas
Oh,
because you all
yes.
have such delightful
Mrs.
flavors.
McCartney's tea.
Yes.
Yeah.
How did that get started? How did you all get into tea?
We had a 4th of July party here, and one of the guests, I said to him, will you have a cocktail, a glass of wine, a bottle of beer? He said, no, actually, I'm off the booze. How about a nice cup of tea? Now, you're English, you must know how to make tea. I said, of course I do. I grew up on tea. So that's how it started. He said, why don't you start a line of Mrs. McCartney's teas? What's more English than tea? And what's more Liverpool than Mrs. McCartney? So that's how it began. He helped us to research, and it went through various phases. And actually, we finished up with the distributor we're with now. They bring it in from where, Ruth?
All over
Sri Lanka, China, Russia,
India, Dimbula, South
Thailand, all over the
South
place.
Africa. Yep.
Into Buffalo, New York. And Ruth and Martin designed the labels, and they get it and put it into bags, which are biodegradable.
Yes.
And there are no staples.
Right.
So there's nothing naughty in there at all.
And that one, Doctor, that you were just holding up, the red one, that's called Golden Slumbers. That's again my sencha, which is a Japanese green tea with toasted puffed rice kernels in it, which has a story from 310 BC, which I won't bore you with now, but it is in Madam's. In Madam's latest book, All You Need Is Tea. And so that one we were like, oh, it's kind of a sleepy time tea. It's almost a no caffeine tea. It's green tea. It's very calming. So we came up with the name Golden Slumbers because it makes kind of a golden colored tea. And the story behind that is when I was about 8, still going to the smelly piano teacher.
Mrs. Stinky.
Mrs. Stinky.
Yeah.
I was trying to learn something from the 15th or 16th century by a guy called Thomas Dekker, a poet, and also a musician. I had this music up on the piano stand, and I was just strangling this poor thing. It was just horrible. And Paul came down all hungover one Sunday morning, back in the days when he used to party, and he's like, what on earth is that noise? It's like nails on a chalkboard. What are you doing? And so he couldn't read music. I couldn't read music. The only thing we knew was that the lock on the piano, when you opened it, the next note up was middle C. So that was literally our only clue. Yeah. And so we started picking out the tune, and he said, oh, this is really beautiful. What's this? And I said, well, it's called Golden Slumbers. And he said, well, who's the artist, And I said, oh, it's a 15th century poet called Thomas Dekker. And he said, oh, that's great. And I said, well, why? He said, because it's in the public domain, and if I use it, I don't have to pay royalties. So I was like, perfect. And then, of course, he made it what it is today, Golden Slumbers. But I always like to think about, in this tea book that Angie and I have just put out, there's a QR code in there that links to a video of Paul telling the story about that, which is kind of fun. But yeah, no, we have 14 flavors. They're all either organic or grown above the pest line. Above 14,000 feet, you can't get organic certification because there are no pests. So there's no pesticide. So you can't get the green stamp. I know.
Put some of our politicians up there.
Exactly. Yeah, some of them. And so that's the story of the tea, and there you go. And you can get it at mrsmccartneysteas.com. And 10% of our profits every year go to the Linda McCartney Breast Cancer Research Foundation in the UK, in Liverpool.
And I thought that was so amazing because I'm sure there's a medicine component to it that you all give back to
the
organization that's doing stuff about
If you know what though, Doctor, if you don't give back, if you don't just put out the love,
don't give back,
you can't expect it to the universe is an exchange of energy, and if you don't do nice things for either nice or even bad people, you can't just sit there and expect it to rain love on you. It doesn't work that way, right?
Yeah, some people do, but
well, some people do, but let's see how that works out for them, eh?
Yes. And then you had mentioned books, and I know you had mentioned the tea book, Matt. We can certainly make sure we promote that. But this book, too, is just so delightful.
Yeah, it's fun.
A wonderful story. So talk to us about how you came up with the idea of doing the Liverpool.
Well, Ruth said to me, what are you going to write about next? I said, I really don't know. And she said, think back to childhood. And I said, jug bands, nursery rhymes, limericks. They all used to sing and do limericks in the air raid shelter. And she said, okay. So I said, okay. And off we went.
There we go.
I
This
just
is
sat down and made a pot of tea and off you go.
so
So
this
this
one.
is about the Beatles and Liverpool and what Liverpool has produced and the liver birds and lots of little anecdotes about that. And Ruth created the cover.
Right.
Yeah, and all of the illustrations she created from scratch with her little clever way.
Yeah. Oh, I've got all kinds of Wacom tablets and Photoshop and Illustrator and digital fun stuff. So that's that. And it's really a sort of what we've been doing with Angie's author career is an intergenerational thing, so that grandparents, especially during the pandemic, can sit with their grandkids or kids and introduce them to Days Gone By in a fun way. So we came up with something 15 years ago using QR that's everywhere now, called Smart Book Technology at McCartney Multimedia. And we started putting it in all of our books that we produce for clients so that you can literally have the reading and the video experience side by side, And so that one, There Are Faces I Remember, has got a lot of the people we were talking about in it. There's 168 people who've crossed Angie's path. The cover is a painting, actually, by Shannon MacDonald, the incredible artist. But all of the images inside, again, it's just sort of my hobby. I digitally paint these things. That took about 2.5 years to write. And there's only 1,001 of them.
Yes, I was just telling the doctor about that.
And each one has an autographed by Angie and I 8x10 family picture of my dad and Paul and her and I taken in 1967. And three of the numbered pieces will win fabulous gifts and prizes, and a Zoom with Ange and a basket of tea and all of those.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Yeah,
sure. I didn't know about that part.
Yeah.
The
And
jury's
so
out on that.
the next book up is All You Need Is Tea, which is over here. And then after that, she's writing a book called In My Life, which is basically all of the things that she has experienced as a human, from history, politics, technology, women's rights, all of it in 9.5 decades. Where we started, where we went to,
And where we hope we're going.
where we hope we're going. Well, we'll just leave it at that. We won't get political, but yeah.
Absolutely. And on that note, and I couldn't imagine it, but I heard a rumor that you all did a practice funeral for one of your
we
birthdays.
did. Was I 80? Ruth?
Your 80th birthday.
That's right.
Yeah, we were looking for a theme, and I thought, well, nobody ever gets to attend their own funeral. So I put everyone on notice who was invited. And there were obviously Martin and me and Ange, and then 77 other people. So we had 80 people for her 80th birthday. And she was the last to know that the theme was come with what you're going to say at Ange's funeral. And then there were more people, celebrities and cousins and people around the world, who read the eulogy and put it up on a private YouTube channel. So we sat here because it's middle of November, so it was dark early. We projected the screen onto the big thing, and we had all these people reading what they were going to say, and it was a hilarious night. So I think more people should attend their own funeral while they still have the chance. What is it they say? Time is not an unlimited resource. Spend it wisely.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Well, Frank Sinatra used to say, didn't he? Something about use the day. Remember, every day could be your last, and one day you'll be right.
How do you think time and wisdom allow you to have just such a practical approach to living, but also not being afraid
I
of
really don't know the answer to that. I only know that every morning, as I begin to waken up, I won't mention that the plumbing department is calling me to get up, but my first thought is, oh, thank God I'm still here. And my second thought is, oh, I've got my eyesight. And then I go attend to the plumbing, go across the hall, switch on my computer, and send an email to Ruth, who lives upstairs, just saying, "Mup." And she knows I haven't died in the night.
Exactly. And I go,
oh,
one more day.
Yeah.
And you have to keep you have to stay alive and keep writing to keep Queen Camilla of England amused.
Oh, yes. When I was writing the Limerick book, I read that the Queen had an organization called the Queen's Reading Room. which had been going for some years, not just recently. So I wrote, I'm never thinking I'd ever get a reply, just to Her Majesty Queen Camilla, Buckingham Palace, England. And I think I got a thank you letter from her. So I'd written to say,
Can I send one,
may
right?
I send you a copy? And she said, yes, I would like to, you too. So I sent it, and then I got another one.
I'm
But,
thoroughly enjoying reading your book.
Yeah.
And so we try to picture where Queen Camilla and King Charles would have such a whimsical book at either Burke Hall or Clarence House or Buckingham Palace. And I guess it's probably in the smallest room in the house because it's that kind of reading.
Toilet reading. Yeah.
I was trying to be polite, you see.
Oh, I know. I
The
know you
smallest
were.
room in the house.
But I was never polite. Why should I start now?
It was very funny.
I'm nearly 95. I can do what the heck I like.
That's right.
Within reason.
Martin and I were out at a lunch meeting, and we have all the security cameras and everything. And the doorbell went, and it was our mailman. And I said, "Hey, what do you need?" And he said, "Oh, you need to sign for something." I thought, those are never good.
Who's going to sue me?
Those are never good. And I said, "Can you hold it up to the Ring doorbell camera?" So he held up the envelope, and it's like CR, and it had an English stamp on it. And I'm like, CR, England, don't know. He said, "Well, I'll tell you what, I'll go do my round, and I'll park here, and then I'll pop by," because we always give him bottled water and let him come in and use the bathroom and everything. And so he said, "I'll pop by for my bottle of water at the end of my round, and I'll bring it back. And if you want to sign for it, great. And if you don't have to." So he brings it, and I look, and it's CR, Camilla Regina, and it's from Burke Hall, and it's signature required. So I open it, and I'm like, oh, good grief, it's a letter to and from the Queen Camilla. So I take it through. So, we have a little celebration. Fast forward a month later, after she sent the Limerick book to Buckingham Palace, doorbell goes again. It's the mailman. I'm like, "What do you want this time? Do you want 2 bottles of water?" And he's like, "No, I've got another letter to sign for." I said, "Oh, I don't know about these letters." He said, "Oh, you're going to want to sign for it. It's the Queen again."
That's delightful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you think you maintain just such an air of civility with all the different things you've been through in your life and humor?
Just be yourself. That's all. It's what you came in with.
Sure.
Yeah, you can't take it with you when you go. When we lived in Nashville,
Oh,
incredible songwriter called Alice Townsend, and she had a country song, and the lyrics were, "I ain't never seen a hearse with a trailer hitch, 'cause you can't take it with you when you go."
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So, final question is that our show is called Music and Medicine. When you hear those words put together, music and medicine, how do they speak to you?
Oh, totally. Joined at the hip.
Yes.
Yeah. And that and laughter, I think, are the really most important. And we all want to be loved, don't we? I mean, I don't care who it is. Everybody wants to be loved or admired or needed. And that's why people have pussycats and birds and dogs.
Unconditional.
Pets.
Yeah, absolutely.
They won't criticize.
Well,
Yeah,
although I
that's-
might disagree slightly there. Dogs have owners, but cats have staff.
Oh, that's
Okay.
true. Yes.
Yeah,
We
But
are cat people. We've had several.
on a deeper note about music, Doctor, as you were saying, music and medicine. Music is medicine. Music is
Yes.
life. I was on a panel with a very famous music executive who started a huge music website in the early 90s, sold it for $650 million. And we were speaking on streaming and what have you. And I was to be seated next to this gentleman who shall remain nameless. And I said to him, "So, what kind of music do you like?" And he looked at me straight in the eye, having just closed this deal, and said, "I don't like music. I like money." I asked to be reseated, which I was, because I'm like, I have nothing in common with you. I can't, but music, through the ages, from tribal foodways to everything.
Drumming.
Music is rhythm, it's energy, it's life. It's, and, the chakras and all of that good stuff. And yes, I'm an old hippie, but music is medicine because it soothes, it informs, it calms, it ignites, it inspires. And so I love what you're doing with your show, and thank you for doing it, because
Yes,
it's a lot.
thank
It's
you.
a lot of travel. It's a lot of hard work, but it's an important message that you're taking to the world. So we appreciate you coming all the way.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's medicine, and I also think it's life. Thank you all so much. It's
Oh,
so
thank
delightful. I
you.
love the laughter, I love the tea. I'm certainly looking at a couple of limericks while we're getting set up and things like that. Laughing inside.
Good.
Just really so much.
That's nice.
Great. Well, it's
Really
been
good.
our pleasure.
Thanks.
You
Yeah.
bet. Thanks for coming.
Sure.